topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners. This is Divya. It's Tuesday morning, and I'm thrilled to be here with y'all. So, talking about kindness stories, I want to share something very beautiful. I was at a bank, at a local bank, and I was just waiting in a line. And what I saw was that there was a mom with a little kid, and the kid was probably 2 or 3 years old, and he was getting a little antsy. I mean, that's not a place for the kid to be, I guess, because you got to stand in line, and mom was trying to soothe him and all that. And the teller stepped out and said that, would it be okay if I gave him a candy? And mom said, sure. And she gave him a lollipop, and there was this beautiful smile break out on that little child's face, and everybody smiled at him. And it was just that the whole environment in the whole bank changed just in that one moment. So think about it. You can do a lot with a little kindness. A little kindness goes a long way. And for those of you who have got our books, thank you. If you have not, get the books, and you will see a difference in your lives. And share the message with other people, because our goal is to impact as many people as we can through our podcast, through our messages, through our books, and through any other media we can. And also, part of the profits from the books proceeds go to kiva.org, so we are helping entrepreneurs. So let's bring in our guest. Welcome, Sally.
Hi, Divya. It's good to be here. Thank you.
Good to have you. So, Sally, share with us as to, do you have a special person? Do you have a special moment in your life that you cherish even today?
Oh, I absolutely do.
Mm-hmm.
The one person, I'd say, I have 2 sons, and both of them are amazing. But my eldest, the moment he was born, I had this very strange experience. My brain told me something that I would not have told myself. As I watched him being lifted up out above me for the first time, and I got to see him for the very first time, my brain said, here is the one who will teach you all you need to know. And I was 25, and I thought, no, parents teach their children all they need to know. But my brain told me this other thing. And I don't know where that came from. But honestly, that boy has been the most incredible teacher all my entire life. And he was a superstar, and he committed suicide at 23. And
I'm so sorry.
Well, he's still teaching me. I had to learn so very much, because I was just becoming a psychotherapist when this happened. And I just barely had the tools to possibly cope with the grief and the pain and the loss, the shock, everything. But as I did, I realized I also had the tools to find out what I missed. And that just threw me into a complete anthropological dig of our entire lives to find out the stories I must have missed that took a superstar to suicide. And over 28 years, I found them. And none of them died with him. They're all happening right now to young people. And so it became my mission as a mom and a psychotherapist to tell his stories in a way that would help other people survive what we didn't. And that's what that child has been doing for me ever since he was born.
Mm. Mm. It's very powerful how you have taken what has happened in your life and turned it around for the better and good of other people. And when we do that, there is so much more power to it. So I'll share with you, I get a lot of different clients, from young parents and to young professionals to, like, who are just having a baby, and then they talk about the issues, like, how they don't have time, to a lot of different folks, professionals, they could be like VP or in executives or mid managers, and they're saying that everything is going great, but I'm not able to communicate with my children.
Yeah.
That stress is pulling me down. I'm really worried about them. And actually, one of my clients shared that her manager, like the manager who was reporting into a VP, that she was a star performer, great, like, like she had joined 3 years back. But her son was in high school and things were going, and that she was going downhill, and she did not know what to do, like, and how to support it.
Mm-hmm.
So, because what happens is the corporate world, like, the work needs to go on.
Mm-hmm.
What can people do? So first of all, you mentioned that you missed out on the story. So even before it comes to this, share with us how parents can see what stories they're missing and what could they do so that they don't have to miss those stories.
Oh, that's such a beautiful question, Divya. I spent 28 years trying to find that answer out. And in my book, I wrote a book, and there are 8 tiers to our personal growth. Every single person goes through the same 8 tiers. If you understand the core issue, it's a growth issue that we face at every new tier. At birth, the first issue in life is trust or mistrust. And that baby is sentient. He is, or she has been in the womb and paying attention, able to hear, able to feel, completely aware of its surroundings. And when it's born, can it trust the environment? Do people love it and hold it and take care of it and give it the attention it needs? Or do they just ignore it and let it cry? I mean, that baby is paying attention. And so what it learns at the very beginning of life is going to affect it for the rest of its life. And in my case, that little baby that I had, which was very wanted, this little boy I named John, after Jonathan Livingston Seagull, because his father was an airline pilot. He was born and he was crying and crying and crying. And the doctor just kept telling me it's colic, it's just colic. And, you just have to wait it out. It's 3 months. And it was just miserable. And after 3 months, he was still crying so hard. And it was just a terrible thing. And I called the doctor and he said, well, maybe it's the 4-month colic or the 5-month colic. And I got so mad, I hung up on him and
Mm.
got another pediatrician immediately
Mm-hmm.
and took my son to see him the very first day. And he was examining John and he was feeling around his collarbones. And he said, oh, look here. He said, feel right here. There was a lump. And he said,
Mm.
he's had a broken collarbone. That's why he's crying.
Oh my goodness.
And it was never diagnosed. And I couldn't tell because it was just a teeny little guy.
Mm.
It was not all the way broken out, but it was broken. And so that
Mm.
was why he was crying. And so he learned to mistrust because I didn't help him. I hurt him. And that affected him for the rest of his life. And then, but the next stage of life, it's, the children are learning how to move and how to get to where they want to go. And so their whole thing is about autonomy. They want to move and be free to move and check everything out. And they're so curious and they want to learn how to move and how to find out about every single thing and put it in their mouth and, play with it or whatever.
Like the more you tell them no, the more they want to do those things.
Oh, of course. So, and so that they really need to feel like they can accomplish things. They can feel, pride in the fact that they can get to where they want to go. And it's called, the stage is called autonomy versus shame and doubt. Because if they can't succeed in just getting to where they want to go, if they're constantly frustrated, if they're constantly unable to do that, they're going to feel bad about themselves. And that
even at that young of an age.
Yes.
Mm.
And so it's really important that children get success experiences, that they get to be able to do these things that they're so desirous of doing, as long as they're safe. So a parent's job is just to create a safe space so they can go anywhere and they're fine. And so you give them places what to do. You can do this, you can do that, you can do these other things, but you basically baby-proof the house so that they can't get beyond a certain height,
Right.
And so at every age, there's a new issue, and each one is a growth one. It's helping them become more than they were. And it's inside of us. It's inside. Nobody sees it. Nobody hears it, but it's there. And so if we know those stages and we know what's important at every stage, then we can really help our children grow.
Mm-hmm.
And so with my son, when he was about 10 years old, I think, I told him, I said, this is why, because he would shy away from you if you tried to touch him. He'd just, back away. And so I told him, I said, this is why you do that, is because, of when you were born, you had a broken collarbone that wasn't diagnosed. So every time I touched you or picked you up, it probably hurt you.
Mm.
And I said, and that's why you do this. It's an automatic response now, but that's not who you are. I said, it was just a misunderstanding from the doctor. And he, once I went to a new doctor and learned what happened, then everything was fine. But in the meantime, you learned not to trust. And so he wouldn't let you touch him. And so I tried to tell him that. And his response was really interesting. He said, well, it's good to know where I got it, but what do I do about it? And I said, I don't know. But I said, but knowing that this isn't who you are is really important, that this is just an effect of something that happened to you, but it isn't who you are. And so, but that mistrust, if you have mistrust at the beginning of your life, you are a higher risk of suicide later on.
Mm. So you've talked about the early stages. What about the later stages in life? Like, as they're growing, and so many times they could be in college or even grown-ups.
Yes. And in the middle stages, like around college, their whole issue is establishing an identity and establishing, who am I? And it's really important that they do that among their peers, because their peers are going to be the people who they're going to be with for the rest of their life. And it's really important that they get reflected back as to their own personality, who they are and how they are. And once that is in place, that's a very positive thing. But it's either identity or role confusion. They just become confused and lost. And that's another place. That's a very serious place where children do end up falling. And that's when breaks happen, schizophrenia happens. That's a very dangerous time.
So can you tell us a little bit more about the role confusion?
Yeah, role confusion is when you can't establish a coherent identity. You just can't, you're not getting, you don't have friends, you don't have interests, you can't find your way in society, you're not getting good grades, you're falling. You're just not getting the support you need to feel strong and clear and able to succeed. And that's one of the things that I really want to talk about, because we aren't teaching children or people of any age how to speak effectively. We're not teaching them how to self-regulate their emotions. We're not teaching them how to listen. And listening is the key to growth and to learning. And and we're not teaching the very qualities that children need to cohere a solid integrative identity that they can trust and grow through the rest of their life with. And so this is where we are lacking as a society. We do not teach social emotional skills in school. And that is a huge, huge problem. And they expect the parents to teach it, and they've never been taught them either. And so it's a real catastrophe that's going on right now in America. And I am really dedicated to turning that around. And so for the last 21 years, I am invited into high schools for free, and I lead an 8-week class in teaching social emotional skills to the students. And I teach them to, these are high school juniors. And every year I walk in and I see a sea of dead eyes, just dead, bored eyes, Divya. And 8 weeks later, you can't believe the light in those eyes, and their hands are constantly raising. Everybody's excited. And they're realizing, as they're learning the skills of how to get along with other people, how to make a difference in your voice, in your eye contact, with your body language, with everything, that you can make a difference. You matter, your stories matter, and every kid learns from every other kid, and it just creates a wave, and there's no end to the possibilities. It's just absolutely a phenomenal thing.
That's fantastic, the
Yes.
work that you're doing. So now, we have the medium to share with our audience. So to share, what are some of the basic things that parents could teach? You mentioned that, a lot of responsibility lies with parents. Well, so let's start at that phase. Share with us some practical ways where the parents, whether it's leaders in the corporations, that, let's say, the young fresh graduates are coming in, and if they're lacking, what are some of the practical ways that they can teach that social emotional learnings?
Well, you want to teach, first of all, corporations are not really educating the new people coming on board of all the different, the life of a corporation, the kinds of things that we face in a corporation. They really need to understand the mechanics of a corporation, so that they can not take things personally, because that's a big problem.
Mm-hmm.
And with my son, when that was the immediate cause of his suicide, was he was, he was had been hired as the point man on a development team in Silicon Valley. It was a very high level job, and so he was the one who was supposed to, be competitive with Microsoft and Apple and that kind of thing. And he was very excited about this job. And he was doing really well, and he loved his boss. He thought it was great. And 6 months in, he went to work one day, and they said, "Okay, you're being transferred to a different part of the company." And they brought him to this new place and introduced him to his new boss. And he started saying, "What have I done wrong?" And they said, "Nothing. You've done nothing wrong." And he couldn't believe them because he was being demoted. And he was like, what has happened? And he went into shock. And he was a boy who had never got a B in his whole life. He was a superstar. He really, really was. And so he thought he had failed, which was inconceivable for him. And nobody was able to tell him anything. They just said, "You're doing fine. Everything's great. This is just what we have to do right now." But he wasn't getting any answer with regard to what had happened. And that's when he actually killed himself.
Oh, I'm so sorry for your loss.
But years later, after I was somewhat healed, I started to research that company because I wanted to find out what happened to it. And what I found blew me away, because what I found was that exactly at the time John was demoted, that same day, the company was in talks with IBM to merge. And they were merging with IBM. So his job was going to be gone, but they weren't ready to publicize this fact yet. So it wasn't time for them to publicize it, but it was going on, it was happening. And so he was being put in a place where that would survive the buyout. They were trying to keep him, but they couldn't tell him about the fact that there was a merger going on.
So in situations like this, what could be done?
That is when I really believe that they should give some kind of a movie or film or something about the dynamics of corporations and how they work, and the kinds of things that happen in corporations that have nothing to do with your work or your ability or your performance or anything like that. But these are just things that happen inside corporations because they're a money-making thing, and they're an entity that only is existing to make money. But then there's other companies, and there's competition, and buyouts happen. And so if people know the lay of the land in a corporation, they'll be better able to understand the meaning and not take things personally where they end up, setting themselves up for failure.
And this goes back to the communication piece that you were talking about earlier, that it's about communicating and letting them know that there are things. And I worked with a lot of my clients who say that, we are going to do layoffs and I cannot tell them, and it's coming.
Yeah.
So.
But they could be warned ahead of time.
They could be, well, sometimes they're not able to get warned, but here's the thing, that when you are sitting and delivering that message, that's the key moment, and prepping them during that time that I want to share how I see you as a strong candidate, as a strong person, and illustrate everything. And then just be transparent that there are things that are going on that we are not at liberty to disclose. And just want to share with you that this has got nothing to do with you. And it's not just during that time, it's during that time of a leader working with the client, or working with the employees, right? Like, working with your reports, letting them know that they're appreciated, they're heard, and creating that nurturing environment where they can grow and building that trust, going back to what you had said initially when your
Yes,
son was young. So like it's the trust is so fragile. So that like, building that trust continuously, not waiting till the last minute. And that
absolutely.
would go a long way. So kind of coming back to parents.
Absolutely.
Now, corporations have a responsibility, but before that, like, most of the time, like especially when they're young, kids do spend time with the parents. So what could parents do in the forming years? What techniques, like if you have any practical actionable techniques that you can share that parents could do, that would be great.
Yes, one of the things okay, this goes back to my grandmother. She was a very definite pioneer. She had come across the prairie in a covered wagon when she was 2 years old. And she was this flinty old pioneer lady. And when I brought my son home and she came to visit for the first time, the first thing she said was, well, don't keep the house too clean. Kids need dirt for their immune system. It makes them stronger. And I thought that was blew my mind because it was the opposite of what I was going to do. Of course, I was going to absolutely sanitize that house to pieces. And she was like, "No, kids need to learn to live with dirt. It helps strengthen their immune systems." And so that was a mind-boggling message, which I helped me a lot. And the other thing she said is turn on the vacuum cleaner the minute he gets home and keep it on for 3 days. Then he'll sleep through anything. But what she was really telling me was something even more profound. She was saying, let children deal with difficulty. It helps grow them from the inside out. You can support them, but you don't take it away from them. You don't, give them a flat playing field. You want them to have issues come up. And as they do, they need to learn the skills to regulate themselves and how to cope with difficulties and how to overcome them. And the more you overcome difficulties, the more resilient you become. Otherwise, you don't get those skills. You just don't. And that's a problem today. There's a real problem. A lot of people with the Gen Z kids aren't even hiring them because they don't know how to cope. Because the parents took care of everything so that nothing bad would ever happen to these kids. And they've learned no skills as a result. They've learned no way to resource themselves, and they could have all the way along. So I really believe that, some difficulties are absolutely appropriate and necessary for children to encounter and deal with. Of course, if there's something serious, you can certainly, support them and believe in them and give them ideas, but don't just give them a flat playing field where everything is taken care of. The other thing is that we really tell our children and our kids experience grades. If they don't get an A, they feel like they're failing. I mean, if you get a bad grade, it is not a problem. It means you're at a new edge. It means you're right on the verge of new learning. It is not bad in itself. It is not. And we sit there and punish children for bad grades when bad grades just mean they're at a new learning edge. And that's a good thing. And every single thing you learn what to do instead of, the mistake you saw, then you learn what to do. And that makes you feel good. I had one of the most amazing young men I had as a tenant one time, who's now in Einstein's seat, told me once, he said, I'm not that smart, but he said, I'm unusually determined. And that's what success is all about. It's about never giving up. that mistakes are to learn from. They're not bad in themselves. There's something you can learn from, and that makes them good. And so no way do we sit there and punish our children for being at a new edge. We sit there and support them and say, yep, there's an answer, there's a solution to this, and you're going to come to it, and you can help them a little bit, but let them do the work, because that's going to help them for the rest of their life, if that makes any sense.
Oh, of course, it makes a lot of sense, because life is not flat.
No.
And well, like, so usually what happens is, what I've seen is that parents themselves are, they may have gone through something through their lives, and they want to give better lives to their children. And in the quest of that, they forget. And I have done that myself too. But the key is, like, we keep on learning and understanding that. And as you're saying that, that's why it's so important to talk about this. So tell us, like, let's say your kids have grown up. Now you've missed the chance to help them become resilient when they were young. What could people do?
Well, after the fact, well, they're already, I'm not sure I understand. Hello? Hello? Divya, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. So you're asking about what you can do if the kids have not.
Yeah, like, let's say, like, there are a lot of parents, because this is not taught to us.
Yes.
As to that, like, go ahead and look at your children's psyche in this way. Or if they're like that, it's passed down from generation to generation, and going back to the original story, or the original client story that I was sharing about, that the parents had done the best they could. Now the kid was grown up, and they were having issues communicating with them. And her boss had come to me, what do I do? Like, I'm trying to support her, and yet the work needs to continue. So what can parents do at that stage?
Well, I would say parents need to allow their children to make mistakes, but they also want to believe in those children and make sure that they are given the tools that they can use to get the education, the information that they can use, but not to give it to them. The parents aren't to give it to them. Get a book, get classes, get tutoring, get something like that, so that they have a way to succeed. There's just so much available, but if it's not happened already, then it's never too late. As long as a child is alive, it's never too late. It's too late if they're not alive. But believe me, in life, everything can happen. And I really believe that making sure the children take responsibility for their learning and their growth and their behavior is really important, because that's what's going to make sure that's going to ensure that they will be successes in life. If they just take responsibility for what they don't have, or what they do have, or what isn't working, if they take responsibility, nothing can stop them. And I have a great example of that if you want.
Of course, please go ahead.
Okay. My little son, my son who was a year and a half younger than his brother, who was a superstar, who never got a B, thought when he was growing up underneath his brother, when he was very young, he thought he was a loser because he couldn't possibly cope with, he couldn't match his elder brother. He wasn't old enough, and he was differently calibrated. And so when he went to school school put him in special ed.
Mm.
And they considered him deficit. They said he had learning disabilities and speech impediments and all these things. But his teacher was a very unique young man, and he saw a lot of potential in my son. And so he was giving him extra work and then complaining about how much he made him stay up late at night grading his papers. And of course, that made my son do more until he basically tested out of special ed.
Mm.
And
Very powerful.
he got out of special ed, but at the same time had lost 2 real years of school. So he was really, really behind. And so he stayed a 1.0 GPA until he was 14. And at 14, he quit school. And he became the biggest truant San Marcos High School ever had. He has the highest number of cuts ever recorded from San Marcos High School. And every day I would get the call, and I would leave work and go flying past San Marcos High School looking for my truant son. And I live in Santa Barbara, and I'd always end up at the beach, because where else is a truant going to go but the beach in Santa Barbara? And I'd go and I'd scour the perimeter like a buzzard and have to go back to work because I'd never find him. I'd be mad. Come home just really furious, and there he'd be, and I'd yell, hit Stonewall, and the next day he'd do it again. But what I didn't know, Divya, which is so important, is that he brought a book to the beach with him every day. And the book was called Getting Straight A's.
Oh.
And he read that book and reread it at the beach. I don't know how many times. I have it. It's completely destroyed. And when he went back to school the next year, he went from a 1 point to a 4 point.
Wow.
Because now he knew how to learn. He knew the study skills. He knew how to really apply himself. That book taught him everything he needed to know. And that's not being taught in schools either. And it didn't dawn on me, but he took the responsibility of getting that book and reading it and reading it and reading it again. And so he went to a 4.0. He maintained that through City College, went on into Cal Poly in aeronautical design engineering, and graduated with an offer from Lockheed, which he turned down, saying, I don't want to be an engineer. And I was like, well, what do you want to do? And he said, I want to model virtual reality with the computer geniuses. And I said, if you've done what you just did, you can do anything you want. So he took a minor in computer science, and a few years later, he was the head of all the production of all 3 Lord of the Rings movies.
Oh, wow.
And so what he had taught me there is that if you take responsibility for your situation, no matter what it is, there's ways you can learn and grow on your own, and then you own your success. You own it in a way that nobody else can take that away from you ever. And so he's a superstar. He's become a superstar on his own. And when his brother committed suicide, it was a really hard time. And on the way to the funeral, he said something that really hit me so hard. He said, you know, Mom, as long as John was alive, I knew I was part of a really smart family. But at the time, he didn't think he was so smart, but he knew he had the genes. And that gave him hope. That gave him hope. And so in a way, his brother was hard on him because he was always the ceiling he couldn't possibly get, match when he was younger. But John also gave him hope that he too had the same genetics. And that he could do the same, and he did. He did. So I think that's so beautiful thing. If you teach children to take responsibility for their actions or their inactions, nothing can stop them.
It's a beautiful story. And Sally, I know you've written a book. Why don't you share with people where can they connect with you and the name of your book? And thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your heart with us.
Oh, thank you so much, Divya, for this opportunity. It's so important. I'm 81 years old now, and I don't feel it. And I feel like I really have a lot to tell people from what I've had to learn the hardest way possible. And the whole reason was for the book was to tell John's story in a way that would help other people avoid the kind of fate that he had. And whether it's suicide or whether it's drugs or if it's criminality or any of these other things that children can fall prey to, those are all basically, they're kind of a passive suicide. They don't kill you, but they will destroy your life. And so I just want people, all children, I want them to grow to their full potential. I want them to just have a wonderful life. And so I'm using my sons as a cautionary tale of what can happen that can go wrong at every age. Because at every age, something did go wrong for my son, and I didn't have any idea about this at the time. Parents are not taught about the stages that children go through as we grow, and the toggle that is alive and well in each of these stages that helps grow us to the next level. And if we don't support these children in the way that works for their inner growth, they're set up for failure. And we're not teaching this in school. And so that is what I created a book that would give people the tools to see exactly what to do from what we didn't do.
Mm-hmm.
That created so that they can take the lessons and survive and thrive for the rest of their lives.
And what's the name of the book?
It's called, yes, This is the Son I Knew Too Late, a guide to help you survive and thrive. And that is my promise. This is not a negative book. It's not a downer. It's a very powerful book because it's taking the real true stories of my son and it's teaching them in a way that's going to help other people live and know how to live every step of the way from birth to old age. It works. And so I'm very proud of this book because I had angels helping me write it. And it took an enormous amount of time, but it's on Amazon. It's 4.6 stars right now. And it's the stories of the people, the reviews of the people reading it are just so wonderful because it's proving that it's doing exactly what I hoped it would do.
That's beautiful. And listeners, you can connect with Sally at sallyaraymond.com and get that book, and it will help you live the life you deserve and help you if you're a parent.
Oh, well.
To help your children. So thank you, Sally.
Oh, my pleasure, Divya. It's such an important issue right now because our whole nation is splitting and it's completely unnecessary. It's because we just haven't been taught the skills we need to have a great society and a happy life, and it's all connected.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us, and thank you, listeners, for joining us, because without you, the show would not be possible. And thank you for being part of our family, and reach out to us and let us know how can we serve you, how can we support you, so that you can live that joyous life that everyone deserves. And thank you, Juan, for making the show technically possible. Be well and take care until next time.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.